Hello, and welcome to this conversation with Tanja Meyburgh, our opening keynoter for the North American Systemic Constellations Conference, taking place next March 8th through 12th at the Lumina Hotel in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. Tanja is the founder and leader of African Constellations and has been a constellator for over 23 years. I have been her avid follower for about 7 or 8 years myself. First, interacting through Real Academy, a robust, growing, and invaluable set of video resources grouped into courses on the most important topics in our field and conducted by international leaders in the constellation community. It's astounding who's there. She curates the Knowing Field, an archive of the only English language constellations journal containing the development of thinking in the field for 20 years, with articles, again, by many leaders in diverse areas of constellation practice. She also moderates Constellation Talk, where constellators from all over the world can dialogue about emergent issues in the field. Most recently, she is the author of Reclaiming Ancestors, a Modern Path to Ancient Knowledge, available on Amazon. And this is in addition to her training and supervision work, and I'm sure many other things I'm missing. Tanja has been firsthand in the land where the fertile grounds of constellations was initially plowed, since, as we know, Bert Hellinger spent 16 years with the Zulu people and came back to Germany a changed man, leaving the priesthood, becoming a therapist, and soon after founding the practice we call family constellations. There's more to say, but I'll let Tanja say that for herself. Mainly, I wanted you to know that if you are not familiar with her work, you're missing a huge and important leader in our field. So, Tanja, before we get into the rest of the conversation, what have I missed in the bio that you want to add?
Wow,
And good
thank you.
morning.
There's a lot in there. Thank you very much, and thank you for the welcome. I think mostly, I suppose, the influence that being born and living in South Africa has had on me. But we'll speak about that more as we talk. I think, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I am a psychologist. I did go through a full psychology training, um, amongst other things. So, yeah, there's a lot of interest in me. I'm an avid student, ongoing student of life. So, many different things that add to the way that I work and to the interests that I have. Probably too many to name.
Yeah. I want to say I think that's one of the things that energetically drew me to you is that you are a woman of Western heritage, but in South Africa. And I know that you really, the way you blend those two is so potent to me. So anyway, yeah. So, so if you wouldn't mind, describe your history in the constellation field with constellations, your journey into the indigenous, turning points or key insights along the way, um, so we know a little more about you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's interesting because I actually discovered constellations after somebody had said to me that I should look into and consult a traditional healer about the possibility that some of the symptoms and the illnesses that I was experiencing were perhaps ancestral. And so I'd had this meeting with the traditional healer, and he had said I need to do ancestral work, and it had never really felt kind of completely appropriate for me to go into learning in an African tradition because I have Western roots, and living in South Africa, it's complex. And
Mhm.
so I hadn't accepted the calling yet. And then a friend of mine said, come and try this. This is something I think you're going to love. And so after my very
You mean constellations at that? Yeah. Yeah.
foundation work, it was with Dr. Ursula Franke.
Mhm.
And she became my mentor and my teacher, and she helped me bring the training to South Africa with Svenja Wachter and some other colleagues. And then we started it here. So it was very quick from my first experience to actually training and getting qualified and then working towards becoming a trainer. And I always had this Indigenous calling on the side, which at first I didn't follow. I thought constellation work would be the Western equivalent.
Right.
I started to realize that there were certain aspects of the westernization of colonization that I felt had left behind some of the important indigenous aspects of ancestral work. And so I did end up going back into my training and my studies as a traditional healer in a Southern African tradition. And so I've had this indigenous and the constellation work side by side in my working and understanding. And I do think that it's deeply influenced my work because I think in the work in South Africa, it's very the indigenous working with ancestors, it's really a part of daily life. And it's a relationship that you're building on an ongoing basis in all your interactions with family, with culture, with daily life, with rituals. So, I learned so much about the ancestral aspect and also about being small and
Uh,
honoring elders and this place of being in holding dignity and reverence for elders, um, which I think, a lot of the Western ways of looking see that, so sort of a little bit not so keen on that and have such an individualist outlook on life that the indigenous work that I was involved in and that I was initiated into helped me to really see how interdependent we are and also how we can develop relationships with our ancestors that are not only based on resolving trauma, but that are also based on receiving gifts, receiving resources, being connected to the strengths and the beauty that they have to offer. And
mhm.
powerful it is when one does that. I mean, I certainly can say that I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have those ancestral practices. So it's been a very big part of my development of this work. And then, of course, living in South Africa and being working in such a complex society, post-colonial and post-apartheid society, it's been really important for me to work and understand what it means of working with marginalized people and with voices that have been marginalized and cultures that have been marginalized and finding the right position as somebody who's fond of the work in the country, but also wants to honor the roots of the work here in South Africa. So that's been a very big part of my development in the work, is that really finding a place of acknowledgement for the lineage that comes from Bert Hellinger's 16 years here.
Mhm. Yeah. I will say I note with all of that, and I don't want you to go into it too much. We're going to go in another direction in a minute, but at the same time, I think in your training for people, you start right with love's hidden symmetry. So you do go back to Bert Hellinger's roots too in this work.
Yes, I mean, I'm very much a classical constellator in that respect.
Mhm.
Um, I did my training, over 23 years ago. And
Mhm.
so in those days, it was first generation students of
Right.
Bert Hellinger. And it was before, in a way, what happened was that it was before this sort of split that happened between him and his first generation students. And so I never went on to the newer constellation work. I stayed very much with the classical work, which is much closer to the indigenous roots here in South Africa as well.
Interesting. Yeah.
Hidden symmetry was the work that we used in my very first training, and it's profound. It is a really, really important book that I don't think we can miss. And yes, there are things that are difficult and controversial, but to engage with those too are an
Yeah.
important understanding the field and responses in the field and some of the criticisms that have happened in our communities. So it's a really rich book to understand. So I think it's really important as a foundation. It's like reading Freud or reading Jung. You
Mhm.
need to the source and to the foundations to really understand the work. And so that feels really important to me. And I think, I mean, we'll see that also in the subject that I'm bringing into the conference. Like for me, roots are really, really important. And it speaks to ancestors, even when it's knowledge ancestors or our knowledge lineage.
Mhm.
How is to really go to those foundational roots to understand what we've grown from, what we've been built of.
Great. I just really agree. Yeah. Well, since you've kind of alluded to that, why don't we turn to your keynote at our conference? So, um, the theme of the conference echoes what you said is important in terms of this interdependency, and we're calling it One Circle from separation to wholeness. And so, can you talk about where your keynote sits at the beginning of that and what you hope to cover?
Well, first of all, maybe I must just say that I really love the title of the conference, and I'm very honored to be a part of it. It reminds me of the Bert Hellinger quote that speaks that that our task as facilitators is to bring together what has been separated, and it feels like that's an ongoing task that we have as constellators. And when we're working in a field where there's trauma and in a world where there's so much trauma and splitting, that is really our role is to move beyond that and to bring things back into one circle. And yeah, so I've been invited to kick off the conference with the roots, and connecting to our roots. For me, it's really important to honor the land and to honor those that were on the land before us as a way of really arriving, greeting. It's part of my tradition that we do that before it brings us into right relationship with the people that were there before us, and and that the work can be blessed and go in a good way. And so part of my keynote will be addressing that, addressing the people of the land and those that were there before, but also connecting to and honoring the lineages and the places where we come from. So where the participants come from, where their ancestors come from. I think this is a piece that for me felt like Hellinger spoke about quite strongly the importance of our land of birth. But in indigenous traditions or in shamanic cultures, in many of the cultures that still practice earth-based and very connected to the earth spirituality, that connection to the land and to the earth is so important. And it's really something that Western people have lost and and perhaps don't have that much consciousness about. And so it feels very topical to what's happening around the world at the moment, with immigration and migration. It feels topical to what's happening in the States. It's been topical for us in South Africa, just working for so long with land and what it means to own land in a country where your ancestors have been colonizers, and the price that has been paid for owning that land. And so for me, it's really about just honoring, acknowledging, and creating consciousness around that, so that we can start the conference and our time together in a very grounded and rooted way that honors everybody that's there, and also those that are not there but that used to be there, so that we really starting in right relationship with the bigger field of coming to in the United States. And I'm aware that I'm a foreigner, but it is a topic that I've worked with a lot, and I will come, as best I can, with humility in how we approach it. But it will be done we'll be doing a constellation ritual for this keynote. Yeah.
Right. I wanted to say that we are giving all of our keynoters more time. So it's at least 2 hours. And so that we can have something experiential in the time that we're together and not just have you speak. And I think you just mentioned that we'll be doing something together that will accentuate what you're talking about. I just want to ask you one more question about that. Since you talk about roots, will you be addressing at all Hellinger? Because that's the roots. I assume you are, but I just want to ask you.
Absolutely think it's important, if we're coming together as a constellation community, that we also honor the roots. And that's most certainly the part that I bring, coming
Yeah.
from South Africa and being a person who's born in this country. I bring South Africa with me, as others do bring their countries and my ancestors. And so that will definitely be a part of what I think is important to honor. And it's a very much been a passion of part of my work. So to honor the lineage, the knowledge lineage that comes from South Africa.
Yeah.
So quite a lot of people who don't understand, who think, first of all, there's a big polarity in how people see this. Some people say there's nothing from South Africa in Hellinger's work, and I just think that's difficult to understand when somebody has lived in a country for 16 years. You are deeply influenced, especially when you're working with spirituality and with people's soul. So that's very clear. And then, of course, I mean, one of my big endeavors over the years is to get the voices of the indigenous and from specifically the Zulu people who've experienced constellation work, to speak to how that resonates with their own culture, and what may be rooted there. So those conversations, I mean, have been like real research into the roots of the work here. And the important thing is that Hellinger Constellations didn't start in South Africa.
All right.
Start and they have many roots, but South Africa is one of the roots. And they're not something that's practiced in Zulu culture. And it's, so it's really important to be quite clear that when one speaks about that, just to really understand what one's speaking about. It's not a ritual that is done in South Africa. It's rituals that were created by Hellinger and his teachers. I mean, Virginia Satir and various other roots of the work, psychodrama. Those rituals were created, but they have been deeply informed by cultural practices and understanding of the laws of nature and the laws of human beings. And so, I mean, I speak to that quite extensively in my book. If anyone's
Right.
interested, we will address it also at the conference. So it's really to include everything when we speak about the lands and our work together.
Just
Yeah.
the last thing I want to ask you about this. Some people, at least in the United States, talk about Hellinger appropriating Zulu knowledge, which means taking it without permission. And I think you also address that in your book, that that's from your understanding and your sensing into it over years, that that's not what happened. Do I have that right?
Well, I think the important thing is that if you read at the back of Love's Hidden Symmetry, he speaks, it's clearly said that he's he was influenced by the South African, by the Zulu culture. And so, appropriation is when you take something and you don't acknowledge the source, or
Mm.
you use it in a way that you gain from, that the people who you originally took it from don't gain anything from or receive anything from. And so, I I don't I also think that we need to acknowledge that it was a different time, it was a different place. It was, he was an elder, like I don't see it as, like an appropriation in the way that he went to go and take something. He went to go and give something, and he received something in exchange. And I never had the feeling in the time that I knew Hellinger in any of his work that he tried to take something without acknowledging it. So um, I guess in these days we would have said that would have been appropriation.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not to be more specific about the sources or the things that you
Right.
that develop. But I also think that much of it may have been quite unconscious, and some of it um, is daily practice. Yeah, so I think it could have been acknowledged more. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. Thanks for that perspective. My next question is supposed to be, why is this topic such a passion for you? Which I sort of feel like you've answered. But so I'll just say, is there anything else about that you'd like to say, or anything else you want to add as we draw this to a close?
I think maybe I should add that, this topic is important to me because of where I come from. And when you really feel into and work with your history of place, you start to realize so much about how we stand and find ourselves in positions that are not appropriate. The land work for me really started by um, looking at where I lived and wanting to honor the people that were here before me and being very aware that my claim to private property of my home was at the expense of people who were forcibly removed from the land. And and in working with that and in trying to understand and find a good path through that, I started to develop rituals and ways of working with it, and with colleagues, deepening the knowledge and practice of understanding this in a South African context, and then going on to work in Arabic countries and with Palestine and with Israel, and just realizing how this is, it's been the same image has been perpetuated again and again and again all over the world. And so we have commonalities and we have things that we can awaken to, especially as Westernized people, that will bring greater healing to all of us. And instead of sort of saying, let's work with colonization, we start with honoring the land and with the people that were here first. And it's a different way in to a healing movement.
Yeah, I understand. That's great. I can feel it flowing, and I appreciate the perspective. Well, I personally can't wait till you're here, and so glad that I get to work with you some. And is there anything else you want to add? I think we've covered a lot of it.
Yeah, and I think maybe I should just say that this is still evolving. So the intention is there, and of course, what I find is as we get closer and closer to the event and different people sign up,
Right.
things
Oh,
change,
definitely.
and the actual ceremony might change quite
Right.
significantly. So um, it's still evolving, so I haven't fixed it. But
Totally.
see what happens in the interplay between who comes and the
Right.
place there, and my ancestors as they step onto the American soil, which will be for the
Ah,
first. Haven't
that's right.
I haven't actually traveled in the States before, so that's going to be an interesting meeting. So I look
Yeah.
forward to it very much. Yeah,
Do
and
our best to welcome you. So, anyway, well, thanks for your time. And again, Tanya will be our first keynoter at the North American Systemic Constellations Conference next March 8th through the 12th at the Lumina Hotel in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. You can register, although there should be a link below this when you see it, by going to NASC, NASC community. So there's two C's, one for NASC and one for community.org. And I, by the way, am Catherine Curran, and I am a member of the conference committee and a constellator in Minnesota. So thanks for your time this morning, Tanya.
thank you so much, Catherine. I appreciate it.